Hey everybody, welcome to another Ask Philip live Q&A. This is this is May 10th, 2024, and today we've got a really good question. Effectively, it's in the hard gaining realm. One of our female members, Isis, who was also on the show, and she's got some really good questions and a bunch of screenshots of exactly what she's been doing in macrofactor and how she's been tracking that we're going to go through today. And I think it'll be helpful for anyone who's interested in what happens after your life gets disrupted a little bit and stress changes, and then you're trying to gain muscle, and all of that comes together. Before we do, some quick announcements today I wanted to mention. As always, the podcast has a new episode today. Friday is almost always an interview episode. I've got such a backlog of interviews coming up, amazing interviews that, they just keep coming every Friday. Tuesdays tend to be our long solo episodes. And by long, I don't mean too long. I just mean they're on the longer end, 30, 45 minutes, an hour. And then in between, we have the quick wits and the bonus episodes. But today's episode is called Big Butts, Strong Butts. We love them all. How to train your glutes with Sue Bush. And in some ways, this conversation surprised me because Sue and I, we collaborated because both of us were the featured expert contributors of the same issue of Body by Science. That's Dr. Bill Campbell's Body by Science. And she and I were the contributors to that. So we reached out to each other. I should say I initiated, but we decided to be on each other's podcast. So I was on hers. You'll see a replay of that available at some point in the future, but if you want to check it out now, go to Physique Development Podcast. And then she was on my show, which is out today. We talked about glute training. But what's surprising about this, and maybe it shouldn't be to me, is how much of this focused on principles of training that apply to any type of training. And again, it's not really surprising. It's just sometimes when you expect someone to get into a specific area of the body, like glutes, you get into exercise selection and glute exercises specifically. But we really talked about intensity, execution, programming, your individual response, the importance of tracking and logging and training over 40 and all of these things. So it's an amazing episode that you're going to learn a ton from if you listen. Sue is full of, I just let her talk because she's just full of wisdom. So definitely check out the podcast. If you love the show, please always share it with others. Share it, tag it, screenshot, take send a review, whatever. Pick one thing that you can slightly go out of your way to help others find the show, because then it'll help it grow and reach more people. And then earlier this week, the Tuesday episode was about how fast you should lose weight for weight loss. And I had live streamed that recording in the group, so you could always catch it there, but it's also on the podcast. A couple quick wits this week. One is about the conflict between wanting to be thin and skinny versus where happiness actually comes from and how to determine that for yourself. And then I addressed the controversial clip that came out with Dr. Gabriel Lyon a few weeks back saying, walking's not really exercise. And I addressed that in I think a slightly more nuanced way. And I definitely don't throw Dr. Lyon under the bus, because I love a lot of what she stands for in terms of prioritizing muscle over weight loss. So check those out. And then one more quick announcement. If you want your question on the podcast answered in a Q&A, the best way to do that right now is to submit a voice message. All right. So I posted and pinned this post with a link. I just did that this morning. There's a link to our, why did it do that? Oh, I know what happened. Oh my goodness. Here, I'm just going to scroll down here. There's a link to the fan list page where you can submit a voice message. And once I have a few of those queued up, I can do an episode where I will play your recording, give you a shout out. You can hide your name or not, whatever you want, whatever you're comfortable with. And then I'm going to answer the question. So we're accepting those now. Go check that out. You could definitely text the podcast as well. But people love hearing directly from the person with their own voice. All right, let's jump into Ask Philip, which is going to become bi-weekly. I know this is a super valuable service, but given the number of responses we've had lately, despite the growing size of our group, I'm going to limit it to every other week so we get a good number of questions so people take advantage of that. And also, I tend to be spending more of my time in Wits and Weights Physique University these days, where private students and clients get a lot more of the weekly attention. We do the weekly calls, we do the weekly workshops, but I definitely want to continue providing this free service and value here for those who aren't quite ready to make that investment or haven't made up their mind yet to jump in and accelerate their progress with the Physique University or coaching at this point. So we're going to get into the question for today. And by the way, the so-called rules of the Ask Philip are to help you. You need to help me by giving me as much information as you can. And that's exactly what our question did today with Isis. She provided a whole bunch of detail and then screenshots from her tracking app from macrofactor. So if you're listening to this on audio, just know that if you're listening to this on the podcast, just know that there isn't a video version of this in the Facebook group or on my YouTube channel, which is also Wits and Weights, if you want to see some of the screenshots and compare it to your own experience. Isis asked the question. She says, it's very individual, but it's been bothering me for a while. I'm glad it's individual. That's really what Ask Philip is all about. I'm in a very moderate bulk. I set it to increase at 0.3% of my body weight per week, and I'm just letting macrofactor adjust my calories. All right, so quick pause. She's using macrofactor, which is really the only app that can adjust to your metabolism and can also detect the rate of muscle to fat you're gaining based on your rate of gain and adjust your calories accordingly, okay? If you don't yet use macrofactor, try it out, download it, use my code Wits and Weights, get an extra week on your free trial. But anyway, she set it to 0.3%. So anybody who's heard me talk about building muscle, or if you attended my training or you got the muscle building blueprint, you'll see that the optimal rate supported by the evidence is in the range of 0.2 to 0.3% of your body weight per week. So she's going on the slightly upper end of that, which is in the optimal range, which I love. I always love going a tiny bit more aggressive if you're comfortable with it, despite the potential for a little bit of added fat gain, because then you ensure that you're going to gain a lot of muscle. All right, back to her question. Weight was consistently going up until about a month ago. Hold on, am I recording? Yes, I am. Until about a month ago that I went through a very stressful situation, lost my appetite, normal for me, I assume she means normal for her when she gets stressed, and ended up eating a bit less than 1,000 calories for 3 days. All right, so that happened, right? Then everything went back to normal. But ever since, it seems to me weight is resisting going up, especially in the last week that I've included more calorie-dense food, junk to be precise, which, again, let's define junk. I assume it means highly processed, ultra-processed type packaged foods, or donut things with a lot of fats and carbs, and sugars like donuts and pizza and ice cream, something like that. To be able to eat all my calories, because weather has become too hot and humid and I barely have any appetite, plus it takes forever to digest satiating meals. It's my first bulk. I'm really clueless about how it's supposed to go. Is my gaining rate normal, or do I need to make some adjustments? So the gaining rate itself that you've selected as a target is perfectly normal, 0.3% per week. I do want to address some of the things here before we get into your data. First of all, whenever you go through a big change in your body's experience and its stress, like you said, a very stressful situation, and on top of that, you didn't eat because the stress caused you to lose your appetite, that's even a further stressor on your body, where it went from a slow gain to all of a sudden you deprived it of calories for 3 days, which, that's not the end of the world. It happens. It happens just like in the other direction when we overconsume for a few days. Okay, we acknowledge it, we move on, we get back to our plan. And like you said, everything went back to normal. You also talked about weight resistance, which sounds like a little bit of a hard gaining situation going on. So we're going to look at your data in a second. And then you said, especially in the week that I've included calorie dense food. Now, that could be a coincidence or it could be related, keeping in mind that if you normally eat a lot of whole foods, say 80, 90% whole foods, and now you're eating, let's say 50 or 60% processed foods, which actually is more typical of like the Western diet, then you are definitely getting fewer nutrients. Maybe you're getting less protein. I don't know, because I need to see, I'm going to look at your data in a second if we could see that. You didn't mention protein specifically, but if there's a change in both the macros and the micros, that's yet another stressor. And all of these can cause your body to want to go back to homeostasis, even when you're gaining. Now, you would think logically, all right, I'm giving my body more food, and so why would it feel stressed in that sense? But if you're stressing it in other ways, like you're depriving yourself of hydration, you said it's hot and humid, so your cells are lacking in hydration. The mitochondria, now they clamp down and become more efficient. More efficient, meaning you're going to burn fewer calories, and so on. Now, I don't think this is 100% what's happening. I think a lot of what's happening here, Isis, is simply you've gone into a hard gaining situation. So we're going to look at your data to back this up. And again, for those watching, you can see I'm going to pull up the screenshots, but if not, I'm going to describe them as best I can. First, we have her weight trend. Now, Isis's weight trend was going up, gradually over weeks by a fraction of a pound as intended. And then it actually went up quite a bit, her rate of gain picked up a lot. And then it dropped significantly as she underate and became stressed. And then it kind of leveled out, started going up a little, and then dive bombed just a bit over the last few weeks. Now, this is all within like a pound or two, we're talking, or a kilogram or two. It's not like a massive change, but it's enough, right? Like at typical female body size, when you talk a couple kilograms, it starts to become meaningful over time, over the trend over time. So we definitely see what we'll call weight gain resistance, if you want to use that term. Maybe you want to call it a plateau. Then we go to the next screenshot, which is her targets. And her targets are about 2250 calories, 120 grams protein, 80 fat, 255 carbs. And her rate is set to 0.3% gain, which is 0.16 kilograms per week. And you might be listening to that and saying, wow, how can you even get precise enough to tell what's going on? Well, again, we use macrofactor for that because it can very precisely keep up with your day-to-day change in metabolism. And then because you're tracking your weight frequently, the trend weight over time gives you enough information to be able to react to that. Now, if you're changing very quickly, like if your body's changing very quickly due to stress, lack of calories, a big change in your diet, macrofactor is not going to be able to keep up with that. And that's by design. It doesn't want to overcorrect. It doesn't know if this is like a temporary thing that's going to correct itself quickly. So before we look at your expenditure data, we're going to look at your how much you've consumed relative to your target. And so I have a screenshot up here that shows me your target day to day over the last 30 days, and then your nutrition, your actual nutrition, and you are spot on. So you're the type of person who like hits her targets religiously. Okay, great. So we know that about you. And we know that you've been hitting the targets, and yet that target hasn't been getting you what you want. So that brings us finally to the expenditure graph. This is your metabolism, how many calories you burn every day. And what we can see is, okay, after that kind of period of stress or illness, your expenditure has shot up almost vertically. Like this is about as extreme as a rise as you're going to see in a short period. It went from about 2,100 calories to over 2,200 calories in the span of like a week or two, okay? And that's only because macrofactor is detecting that indeed you're not gaining weight, yet you're hitting this surplus. Therefore, you must be burning even more calories, and we need to give you more, increase your target. So what's going to happen is macrofactor is going to increase your targets gradually week to week. If I'm coaching you, and I'm basically coaching right here on this Ask Philip, I'm going to tell you to get way ahead of this by eating more food right now to the tune of at least 100 calories a day, right? That's what I would aim for. So if your target is 2250, I would aim for 2350. At the risk of a tiny bit of fat gain, sure, but if you're actually burning this many more calories for whatever reason, like we can't necessarily always explain all the reasons why our expenditure goes up, but in the short term it is, okay? This is very much like when I went through my shoulder surgery and I was recovering, my expenditure shot up so fast I started to lose weight, and I had to up my calories proactively ahead of that. And by the way, I recently did a live workshop in the Physique University called How to Adjust Your Calories Intuitively. And on that workshop, we taught everyone like 9 different scenarios. This is just one of them where you have to take control of your situation and you can't just rely on, an algorithm, because the algorithm doesn't know all the little things that are happening to you right in the moment. And this is where kind of that intuitive or coached approach comes in. So again, if you're looking for resources like that and guidance like that, we do that in Physique University. All right, that's my sales pitch, but continuing. Isis, what you got to do is eat more food. And then your objection to that is going to be, well, I don't have an appetite. It takes forever to digest satiating meals. It's too hot and humid. This is where I'm going to dig into your psychology. I'm going to ask you to reframe these things, because to me, these are excuses. You know they're excuses. I'm giving you tough love right now. That's all they are. It's like when people say, I can't walk because it's too cold. Like, why not? You have a sweater, right? You have a jacket. or I even can't walk because it's rainy. Well, you have an umbrella, or you can walk around inside. Like, we make excuses, and I get that there's friction. We also want to reframe these. So if we say, okay, it's hot and humid, that's an opportunity to what? To drink more fluids, to maybe stay inside and stay where it's cool so that I can eat more, to eat more cold, refreshing foods that are tastier when it's hot and humid, right? Like, there's different ways to reframe it. And then you said it takes forever to digest satiating meals. So your implication there is that if you have more filling foods like whole foods, you're just going to be so full that you can't eat that much. Well, again, I need to look at your meal timing and frequency and what you're eating. So let's run through those. We've got your meal timing. Are you in a compressed eating window, or do you have an opportunity to widen that up? To eat earlier in the day, eat later in the day, not so late that it impacts your sleep, and then stretch it out so instead of you eat 4 times, you eat 5 or 6. That's one. And when you eat smaller meals, sometimes then that allows you to digest in a way that doesn't fill you up as much. And then, so that's timing and frequency. And then number 3 is, what are you eating? So you said junk food. And again, you do not have to go to processed foods to get calorie density. There is adding oil to food. There is dried fruits. There's nuts and seeds. We have fatty forms of dairy. We have fatty forms of meat. So if you, heck, whole milk, right? Like, I think you're an omnivore, right? And you eat animal products. If you don't, again, there's different ways to do this. I would look for all the calorie dense foods that the volume's the same. So you're looking for actually lower volume whole foods, right? There's also smoothies. You can make a protein shake where you blend a bunch of higher density things in there. Get fruit, things like that. There shouldn't be an excuse. Now, I have a guide with different levels of densities of foods in there, but I think that's actually intended for the fat loss phases. So I have to see if I have one on calorie dense foods. But regardless, that's what you got to do. All right. So long story short, aim for at least 100 calories more than your target, even up to 150 for the next 2 weeks. See how your metabolism starts to, if it continues to climb, you're going to have to keep overshooting the target for a while. If it starts to level off, you can also level off as it kind of converges to a normal, weekly adjustment. Okay. That's my advice for you. If that does not answer your question, or you still have some unsaid aspects to this or want to share more data, comment on this video so that we can continue the conversation and everyone else can learn from this. If you need more specialized guidance, ISIS, you know how to find me, and you can always join Wits and Weights Physique University. We've got a lot going on in there. We've got the workout programs, which I have a very special announcement coming up on that. It's going to make it even easier for students to do their workouts. We have the custom nutrition plan you get when you join. And then we have all the courses like the metabolism, the calorie course. We have the menopause course. We have the physique foundations course that's going to roll out soon. So many good things that help you get on the right track, including things like this, where we immediately help you bust through and get ahead of those plateaus. Anyway, I hope this helped everyone watching or listening in your own situation. If you're trying to go after a bulk, it is all about hard gaining and dealing with that. If you want a more deep dive into hard gaining, and there's a podcast that I did about it, and I'm going to look it up right now. If you go to witsandweights.com/podcast and scroll down to the podcast finder, you can just type in hard gainer and you will see episode 130, The Hard Gainer's Guide to Outsmarting Your Metabolism. Go revisit that because it has a lot of detailed strategies for how to do that. All right, that's it for today's Ask Philip. I hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon.